Hard times, making us wonder why we even try since, well, technically since forever, since humanity began, but officially since 2017. What's up everyone, welcome back to Beyond AR TV. My name is John and you're tuned into my series Dear John. It's a question and answer series that I have with my viewers where I take a detailed question that you guys leave either in the comments using the hashtag Dear John or on Twitter, and then I select and decide upon which ones I want to discuss in video form, especially if I feel it needs more context. After some intense treasure seeking in the comments section, I finally came across a comment that I felt was worthy of the Dear John name, something that could be a vessel in this series, and it's a question regarding the tortured artist. Like I said, I do need more viewer questions from you guys, music related of course, so if you've got something that you feel is interesting, I just punched my computer, then please drop it in the comments section down below. Thanks for tuning into this episode, please drop a like if you do enjoy and subscribe to the channel if you're new. Sophia asked, Dear John, do you think the archetype of the tortured artist is a thing in music? A lot of my favorite musicians have been going through hard times over the last 5 to 6 years. Paramore almost imploded, Derek from Sum 41 almost drank himself to death, Avril got Lyme disease, and worst of all, Chester died. It sucked, but on the other hand, those struggles inspired great music from said musicians. You said it yourself, Ariana Grande has gone through a lot over the last few years, and that's probably one of the reasons why she released 2 albums in less than 2 years. They went on to say how their favorite music is often not the party stuff, it's more the stuff that you can connect to on a personal level, but they finished it out by saying, so what do you think? Do unhappy artists make better music than happy ones? The tortured artist is a term that we've been hearing for centuries now, dating back to at least the Renaissance times, and then moving into not just your architects and your painters like Michelangelo, Picasso. It then moved into music, and we saw how Mozart channeled things, and then we moved all the way up a few centuries to the Beatles, and then up to somebody like Linkin Park or Jay-Z or Paramore. We see the archetype of the tortured artist, something where they write their best material or they write things when they have their back against the wall emotionally. I think tortured artist doesn't just apply to somebody who is feeling angry or feeling sad and like they're depressed and down and out. That's a huge part of it. But I also mentioned a name like Jay-Z because I feel that oppression or feeling like the underdog can also make the tortured or starving artist, if you will. I really hate to say it, but I do feel that the tortured artist often makes better music. We see many times that an artist will start off as sad, as the underdog, as somebody that everybody can relate to, at least people who are struggling emotionally, grappling with things like that, and they see this band or this artist and they're like, you've got all the answers, you know exactly what I'm going through. But then that band or artist starts taking off and things start to change a bit and maybe you feel a slight disconnect. It's inevitable because more often than not, it's hard to write genuine material if you're not genuinely going through something. And there's some bands that have gotten huge and they've executed this maneuver quite well. They've channeled their pain and darkness into some very, at times, happy sounding music that is still dark, but also still some sad music. Paramore are a fantastic example. They did this on their album After Laughter, after Hayley Williams, the lead singer, went through a lot of personal stuff. There was a big lineup shift in Paramore. This happened multiple times. It just kept feeling like things were falling apart, but then they came back. They got one of their old members, Zach Farrow, back in the band, and they put together an album that was about redemption, forgiveness, but also a lot of other things like grudges and a lot of emotional manipulation and struggles, just everything that they'd been through. And despite being a huge band, they were still able to genuinely put themselves out there. I honestly see Paramore as more of an exception to the rule because more often than not, I feel that the artist is making their most genuine music, I suppose, when they are on a lower level of success. Maybe perhaps they haven't blown up, or maybe even if they have, they've kind of maintained their down-to-earth personality because they were big from the start. But with an artist that slowly grows, slowly rises, you see the inevitable shift from tortured artist into more happy or perhaps even more celebratory. That's why I feel a lot of hip-hop and rap music often starts off like they're hungry, they're fiery, and then look to somebody like Drake. He's run out of things to say, and instead it's kind of turned into the sad hours music where I feel like he's just drumming stuff up for the sake of making another song, whereas his early stuff, he actually had something to prove. But once you're on top for so long, not just Drake, but also other minds in the world of rap, including Jay-Z, who I already mentioned, his early stuff was more raw, more possessive, more angry. He had something to prove. He had a lot of injustices that were served to him. Just look at one of his big hits, 99 Problems. He even touches on police brutality and unfair treatment of minorities in that track. And it was huge. And then he went on to become a multi-millionaire, married to Beyonce, wealth beyond belief, and then his music, at least in some people's opinion, took a big nosedive, and instead he had to look at other things like introspection to actually make a great album again, example 444. The tortured artist is honestly a term that I more associate with 90s and 2000s music because I do feel that we went through this creative peak where people were at least showing themselves. They were showing off the skeletons in their closet, bringing them out and putting them on blast or else in the spotlight throughout those decades. But in recent times, I feel like music has kind of gone the way of Instagram, if you will, where everyone is living the best version of their life, or if we do get something sad, it's more so to be relatable, and it's like, oh, tag a friend. Well, that's kind of what music, at least in many mainstream senses, is starting to feel like. I think of the Friend Zone Anthem by Anne-Marie and Marshmello, or even some of these other tracks that just feel like they're picking up on the message that everyone else is already selling, and then they're just kind of saying, hey, I agree with this too. Whereas the 90s and the 2000s, that was more about realism. We got Soundgarden, we got Chris Cornell, rest in peace. Him, alongside at the turn of the century, Chester Bennington, who, rest in peace as well, two beautiful voices, two incredible voices, so passionate, so raw. They both had very hard times in their life, but they pushed through and made great music that helped millions of people in the process. Now, eventually, both of those groups definitely pushed towards happier messages, or at least more introspective ones where they reflected on things, and you could say that a lot of the music that came from both of those bands in their later days was still pretty wrapped up in anger or hatred of something or oppression or a certain feeling of sadness, but I definitely felt that they were more motivated. Now, it became clear that they still were the tortured artist, and that did come out. You saw a track like Heavy featuring Kiara come out with Chester on vocals shortly before Chester passed, and it's really unfortunate. I feel like we have this vicious cycle of supporting the artist or the band that is oppressed or down and out, so depressed, and you see them for what they are, you accept that and say, I'm like you. But then they get bigger, they change things up a bit, and suddenly we're no longer on board at all. And it's fine if you're not into the music, but cutting them down as people, it's really against the point. The tortured artist should move into somebody who is able to grow. We should allow them to grow, and even if we're not always there for the music, to cut somebody down as a person, it just feels like an injustice. But we do have this habit of building people up, cutting them back down, and then starting the cycle all over again once we find a smaller band or a smaller rapper that has a message that we can get behind and believe in. But then they get to that victory lap, and suddenly someone sticks a foot out to trip them and say, get back down, we need you to be making depressed as hell music. I'll conclude by saying that it's hard to imagine certain bands that I love making music that feels happy. For example, emo bands like American Football, or people who definitely use elements of emo like Brand New. I couldn't necessarily imagine a super happy song coming out from either of them. There's always like a layer of gloom or depression or anxiety or some sort of hatred or feeling that's coming from the music. but what that stems from is my association of that genre or that defining term with those groups. And I suppose it's more my fault than anything else if they were to expand and do something else and I didn't embrace it. It's my own personal taste and the fact that maybe I couldn't get around that. I realize that I might be a total hypocrite here because I've cut down plenty of artists who have come up and then they've gotten big and then they've done things that I don't agree with, but I try not to make it personal. I try to make it more about the music because more often than not, a lot of times when they're taking that victory lap, that's when they start settling. They settle for less. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. What do you think of the Tortured Artist? Do they make better music like I think? Or do you think that somebody is happier will always win? Don't forget to drop a comment down below if you do have an interesting question or a thought that you'd like to see me answer in video form for Dear John. You can see the last episode here or catch up on another recent video on Beyond right over here. All of my social media accounts, including my Patreon, are linked in the description down below. I appreciate your support and I'll see you soon for more on Beyond AR TV.